I love how you got multiple things all cracking at the same time. Uh, you had mentioned that a couple of the youth that have worked on the trails have gone on to like do that for work.
Yeah. Yeah. So a number of our builders who started out with us have gone on to actually be professional trail builders. It's a real industry here in BC. I mean, it does happen in other parts of the country as well, but particularly here in BC, trail building is a pretty big business. And one of our longest standing trail builders is Skylar Camille. He's actually my friend Tom Eustach's son from the Simk First Nation. I met him when he was 14 or 15, and he was already building out by himself in the woods. And he went through our training program, which is basically we do like a week-long training, and then we work with the community throughout the summer to build more trails. And then the following summer, he ended up working at Sun Peaks, which is a major mountain bike destination resort here in the province. And then a year after that, he joined our crew. So we have the Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program, but we also have like a professional trail development company called First Journey Trails. So he's been one of our pro builders for like the last 5 or 6 years. So he's built dozens of some of the most iconic trails in the province all over the place. And he has a van and he travels all over the place. And Tom always says like, it makes sense because as our people back in the day, like we would have been on the move. We would have been moving up and down the valley with the seasons and out on the land. So I think he's just so proud of his son for doing that and being able to have that kind of opportunity. And we see that with other kids as well.
What goes into now? You got me thinking about trail building more than I ever have. What uh, what kind of skills or materials do you need to put something like this together? Because I like it that the youth are trained on and doing it because then they can even maintenance it, right? It's like
Yeah.
they could teach their kids to maintenance it.
Yeah.
You could build an offshoot another trail or something, but do you have to have like a compactor or what's
No. All the trails that we build with the youth, at least starting out initially, is all hand built trails. So typically for a community, we usually buy around $2,000, $2,500 worth of tools and equipment. So that's like things like rogue hose, which is a particular type of tool that we use to build the trail. Basically looks like a big fancy rake. So Pulaski's, a chainsaw, wheelbarrows, a pile of buckets, really simple stuff. And then once we've laid out a trail system, so we'll lay out the first initial trails and then we teach the kids to build them. And it'll be usually we'll teach them to build the actual trail tread. So that's actually removing the upper layers of the forest floor and actually finding dirt and putting it all together and forming the actual trail tread. But we also teach them how to build small bridges, wooden features, benches, things like that. But so it's really low cost capital. Like building trails as a form of recreational facility is really, really cheap compared to other types of recreational infrastructure. I think with a community we worked for like 5 or 6 years, like Simk is a good example. We worked with them for actually 8 years now. We've built almost 20 kilometers of trail, and it's been probably in total, like paying all the trail builders, paying everybody involved, it's probably been around $200,000. You compare to that, like building a hockey rink or anything like that, the cost, you just can't compare the two. And they probably spend around $5,000 a year in maintenance. It's really not that big. And the biggest user group in that community is actually the women's running club. So 15 women all formed a running club, and they're out there running the trails every day. And that's what you need. If you want a successful trail network in a community, get the aunties out running. Because if there's a tree down, you're going to hear about it. That tree's going to be, we call them the running aunties. They call themselves the wolf pack running mamas or something like that, which is decidedly way more badass.
so you got like a bunch of youth gathered up at how long does it take to get them proficient to where like you got folks like able to send a crew out or something?
It doesn't take very long. Like typically our initial training program is a week. Like, so I'll be in a community for a week, and that's enough for us to show them how to build the basic trails, lay out, say 3 kilometers of trail, and then kind of unleash them. Usually by the end of that week, most of the kids have got a pretty good handle on what they're doing. Trail building is not super complicated. There's lots of little things that need ongoing training, but about a week gets them started. And then usually what we recommend a community has is they've hired a bunch of summer students that they really don't know what to do with them half the time. So we train those kids up, and then whenever it's nice and it's not too windy, they're out building trail. And a community can build between 3 and 5 kilometers in a summer, but they need like a key champion, someone who's working with them all the time. And sometimes that's one of our pros. Like we'll actually send a professional trail builder to a community for a month at a time, or they have someone like a youth leader or a youth coordinator who works with them throughout the summer. And that's about what it takes. So typically we'll do like a 5-day training setup, get them set up, get them ready to go. And then often we'll return and we'll do more advanced workshops later. So now we're getting into footbridges. Now we're getting into, building, viewing platforms and things like that, or dealing with like, maybe there's a lot of like, especially on the coast where we have incredible amounts of rain, we'll go back and do workshops just on water management because it's such a extreme environment.
How do the communities, in your experience of building trails with the non-Indigenous communities, how do the Indigenous communities and people come to the trail? I can imagine a ceremony happening. I can imagine, sort of specific things happening. Maybe there's specific naming aspects when they give a name. Maybe there's a transfer process. I don't know. Those are things I would wonder about my community when they commit to engaging with something like that. What's your experience?
Well, it's very different depending on whichever community you happen to be working with, and it's something that's thankfully starting to change a lot. So every once in a while will get a call from a club, from a mountain bike club, non-Indigenous club somewhere in the province will reach out and be like, yeah, we've got a problem. And they learned that a trail they built, say, years ago. There's one story about this from just north of Whistler and with the Lillooet First Nation, where the club had built a trail through a sensitive area that they hadn't known about. It was literally a drop off of a birthing rock. Like this is where the women went and had, gave birth, like a very, very important area. And I remember they were saying to me, it's like, well, we didn't know. It's like, yeah, but you didn't try and find out either. This is the state of trail building in BC where, for a long time, Indigenous peoples were erased from that process. They were not a part of the process. So people were building trails without their input. And now in BC, through a lot of the court cases that have happened, they have a much bigger say and role in what's happening on the land. So now clubs are realizing, okay, we need to start doing things differently. And I find for the most part, the mountain bike community and the outdoor recreation community is pretty open and progressive. They're willing to engage in those issues. So we are starting to see those differences. So for example, the Squamish Off-Road Cycling Association just signed a partnership agreement with the Squamish First Nation. And it took years and they worked at it very, very diligent. But now they're, and that agreement covers how the trails are being maintained, how they're being built. And they've started to name some of the trails in Squamish. They've had ceremonies around the opening of new trails. So we're starting to see that level of give and take. But like I said, Sorka, the group, they worked on it for years. They hired their kids on their trail crews. They were constantly taking them out on rides. Like they built that trust over many, 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 many years. But we are starting to see that type of a shift here in BC. And that's become a big part of my work and our program. Like our goal is to effectively decolonize the mountain bike industry. And that's some of the things we do is we try to bring people together and have those types of conversations. But it's ongoing.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting. I think that the things that I've been hearing and reading about is the outdoor scene, mountain skiing, biking tends not to be a place for people of color. So I think it's a really important for us to say, hey, we all can do this, and let's make space for all of us. And when Indigenous people come to the table, we offer something special and another degree of connection. So
yeah. Well, I think that's something the mountain bike community is starting to realize, and the recreation community generally is, there's a lot of fear among the non-Indigenous community when we talk about reconciliation, because the implications of it are, frightening. It's like, what does that mean? Does that mean we have to move back to Europe? There's all this fear around it, and people feel the same thing. It's like, oh, we're going to lose access to our trails. Oh no, how ironic. But I think a lot of people realizing as those relationships are repaired and we really enter into a meaningful relationship where we're out on the land in a good way and we're not perpetuating those problems. I think a lot of us are realizing like our relationship with the land, our experience of riding on those trails becomes so much deeper, so much more meaningful, right? Because it's not just a consumer activity. Now it's something that's actually built on reciprocity and respect and relations. I mean, that's meaningful. And I think that's why what excites me about doing this in the recreation space, because it's the one place where a lot of non-Indigenous people have some kind of relationship with the land.
The part about how there's a big series of wellness connections in our chat today. The being on the land, the relationship that one has, and the stories connected to that relationship, and having a chance to keep coming back to that. There's consistency, there's continuity. This speaks to all about the ideas of how do we facilitate wellness in our communities. As a doctor, part of this series is like how do doctors play a role in helping to support this, right? If hopefully a bunch of docs will be listening over these podcasts and thinking, if I were to say, hey, you should do some biking, I think there's more of a conversation to have often with people. Like there's so many ways that one could consider, well, why? How can this be good for me? Right? First of all, how can I get a bike? I don't have any money and all that kind of stuff. And there's no place to go and it's dangerous and all that stuff. But if we could have, as healthcare people, like a high quality conversation about some of these nuances, right? It's about connecting. It's about the relationships with each other. It's the relationships with the land and the stories that you create and the ways that you connect. I could chat for hours. I really wanted to talk a bit more about, like, we had dog days as Indigenous peoples, and then with colonization, the horse came, and we had the horse days. And now we don't have the horse days. We have the car days, but that's not necessarily helping us to be healthy. But then we have these bike days, which, like, going back to like riding a horse is really physical. It takes a lot of time and energy, and it's like a commitment in a relationship. A bike, kind of like that, like the dog and the horse, but not necessarily the car unless you're pushing it, is like something that keeps you healthy, but also is a mode of transportation. And it creates this sense of freedom. At least that's what I experience when I jump on a bike. It's like this, like, it's just great to like roll around and go places. And I'll watch people ride by my house in the day when I'm like working hard on the computer, and I take a moment to put the garbage out, and I see like 10 people ride by my house, and like, wow, they look so happy, and I'm really happy they have time in their lives to do it, right? But anyway, I think there's lots of connection as to the nature of the equipment, and got to have another conversation sometime around, or at least make some plans to help support. How do we get people access to the units or the bikes, and how do we help people to understand and connect and build and maintain those bikes, because that offers wellness. And your story today has facilitated a whole other level of how do we connect with the land, and how do we create these trails and do it in a way that's respectful and engaging and decolonizing and facilitates sovereignty, right? And so thank you very much for our conversation today. Thanks for joining us this week on this episode of Keeping It Together. We'll link all of Patrick's info on the website and on this Indigenous Youth Mountain Bike Program, and all the sources cited today on in the podcast. And please connect with us on our social media. And until next time, let's all be well and keep on keeping it together. I added that. I don't think we've ever done that in the past, right? So
I like that.
Anyway, that's got to.
Keep on keeping it together.
I love it. Thank you very much for having me on.